In 3, 2, 1, and we are live. Hey guys, thank you for joining us. Roman Zhukov from Northeast Philly Connected. We are here in apparently Huntington Valley, and we're gonna interview Seth, who is a commissioner, and Roxanne will perform the interview. But let me transfer the screen to them so they'll be able to introduce themselves. And guys, you're live and you're good to go.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Roxanne. Can't hear there we go. My name is Roxanne Zhilo. I am an attorney in Pennsylvania, New Jersey. And I am here to interview Seth Bluestein, who is the Commissioner of Philadelphia. So Seth, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us who you are.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm Seth Bluestein. I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia, went to Central High School, and went down to undergrad and grad school at Penn. And my wife and I, our two kids, live in Philly, and I just became City Commissioner of Philadelphia.
That's great. And how long have you been the current commissioner?
Yeah, so I just got confirmed by City Council this month. So I have been on the job as City Commissioner for just a few weeks now.
And before you were the commissioner, what did you do?
Yeah, so for the past 10 years, I was the Deputy Commissioner for former City Commissioner Al Schmidt. Al Schmidt ran for the first time in 2011 and became City Commissioner in 2012. He served 10 years, and I was working in his office for the past 10 years.
That's amazing. So it sounds like you were the best man for the job. You already knew all the ins and outs of it. So you mentioned that he ran. So I'm going to be speaking as if I am a community member who knows nothing about elections or the commissioner. So this is an elected position?
Yeah, so in Philadelphia, the city commissioners are a 3-member bipartisan board of elected officials. They run in the same cycle as the mayor and city council. So the most that you can have is 2 members from a single party. So typically in Philadelphia in recent years, you've had 2 Democrats, 1 Republican get elected to run the Board of Elections, which is what the city commissioners do. And, they're responsible for making sure that people can register to vote and have their voices heard at the polls.
Okay, wonderful. And how did you become the commissioner?
Yeah, so late last year, former City Commissioner Al Schmidt announced that he would be resigning in January. He is now the president and CEO of the Committee of 70. For those of you who don't know, Committee of 70 is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization in Philadelphia that focuses on good government and elections reforms. So because he resigned prior to the end of his term, there had to be an appointment and a confirmation for his replacement for the duration of his term. So in December, Mayor Kenny announced that he was going to be nominating me for the vacancy. And then I served as acting commissioner in January and for the first week of February. And then on February 3rd, City Council had a vote and confirmed me for the position.
And how long is your term now? Do you finish off his term, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I'll finish the final 2 years of his term.
Okay, and then you don't know yet?
Yeah, and then we'll see.
Makes sense. So what exactly is a commissioner? What does a commissioner do?
Yeah, so like I said, in Philadelphia, there are 3 of them, and basically everything related to the election. So processing the voter registrations, making sure the poll books are printed so that your name is on the poll books when you go to vote. We have to secure the polling places, programming the ballots and the voting machines, make sure all of the supplies and the voting machines get to the polling places. And then after Election Day, the results come back, and we have to calculate the results and then certify the winners.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of work. So you mentioned that there's 3 commissioners. What does the rest of the structure look like as far as the team that's working on this?
Yeah, so we are basically an operating department of the city of Philadelphia. So we have a handful of exempt employees. These are generally deputy commissioners or assistants who work for each commissioner individually. And then we have a large civil service staff that does the day-to-day work of programming the voting machines, processing the registration forms. All of this work takes place in the office. So throughout the past 2 years, even during the pandemic, our staff has been in every single day preparing for each election.
Sure, I can imagine it's as essential as it gets. I mean, well, I don't want to say as essential as it gets. I take that back. Obviously, we have the medical staff and the police, and, there are people that are more life essential. But as far as government goes, I can imagine that being one of the most essential forms of government.
Yeah, I mean, we have to have an election every 6 months. There's a primary, and then there's a general every year. And the show must go on. And election day is it's scheduled by law, and it almost never moves, although there are some rare circumstances where that could change.
So that's actually exactly where I wanted to go. First of all, before we get into elections potentially moving, which is something I do want to ask about, could you give us the layout of elections? So some people know about the presidential elections, but they don't know that there are other elections at all. So can you tell us, what the difference is between primary and general, the different parties and how they kind of work together?
Yeah, so every state does it differently, but for Pennsylvania, we have a primary and a general every year. And each year there are different offices that are up for election. So in a primary election in Pennsylvania, it's a closed primary, meaning if you want to vote for the Democratic candidates or the Republican candidates, you have to be registered in that party to vote in the primary. But often there will be ballot questions or special elections that occur at the same time. So almost always you can vote during the primary. You just won't be able to vote for the Democratic candidates or the Republican candidates unless you're registered in that party. That's for the primary. And then in the general election, you can vote for any candidates that you want because the two parties will have nominated candidates from the primary, and then third-party candidates can also file to be on the ballot for November. So then when November comes around and you're voting for the final winner, everybody can vote, and you can vote however you want.
So I do have a question then. Special elections. They are, as far as I know, scheduled somewhere in May. I would assume 17th. But at the same time, since you say that each party is voting for each representative from their party, does it qualify for the special elections as well? Or anyone from any party can vote for the special elections?
Yeah, so special elections can be scheduled for the same time as a primary or general. They don't have to be. And then anyone can vote in that special election. So if you take, for example, the 6th Council District, there's now a vacancy. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party can nominate candidates for that using certificates of nomination because they're considered major parties. So they will give us who their candidates are. There's also a filing process for a third-party candidate to be on the special election ballot. So if the special election occurs at the same time as the primary, which it may or may not, anybody can vote in that special election while they're also voting in their primary for the other races.
So let me back up a little bit for people who don't even know. What is a special election?
Yeah, so a special election is one that is not a primary or general. So they can occur for a number of reasons. They can occur because of resignations or convictions, or somebody gets elected to another office. Technically speaking, ballot questions are considered special elections.
Okay. Let's go straight into the next one. Do you feel that people's vote counts?
Yeah, absolutely. If it didn't, I wouldn't be doing this job. I mean, it's important for everyone's voices to be heard. When you go to vote, whether it's at the polling place on your voting machine or you submit a ballot by mail, we process every single vote. Oftentimes people prior to the expansion of vote by mail would always say, well, you only count the absentee ballots or the provisional ballots if it's close. I mean, you don't count those ballots every single election, right? No, we do. I mean, every single ballot gets processed, looked at, and counted every election.
And coming back to the timing of it. So generally speaking, minus certain circumstances, we have primary elections that usually happen in May and general elections that happen in November. So in this particular election cycle, the PA Supreme Court just decided to push back elections. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we don't actually know yet if they're going to move the election. So because of redistricting, and I can get into that a little bit, but essentially because of redistricting, the Supreme Court put on hold the election calendar for filing petitions to get on the ballot because we don't know what the districts are yet. So they are going to be having a hearing over the next couple of days, and hopefully soon we will have clarity on if they intend to compress the election calendar and still try to have the election on May 17th, or if they're going to push back that primary date. Essentially, because Pennsylvania's population grew at a slower rate than the rest of the country, we are losing a congressional seat. So we can't just run in the old districts or have some kind of situation where we can quickly have a solution. We have to eliminate a congressional seat in the Commonwealth. And the legislature passed a map that the governor vetoed. And at this point, the Supreme Court has to make a decision on how to proceed.
Okay, so this is an unusual circumstance. It doesn't happen very regularly.
It doesn't. So we do redistricting once every 10 years after the census. And the only other time that I'm aware of that the elections were moved was the 2020 primary at the start of the pandemic.
Wow. And there's a whole lot of concerns that come with that particular election, obviously. So let me go back to basics a little bit because I don't want us to get too far into the weeds. So just so you know, we're dealing with a lot of different immigrant communities that some of them are active, usually for the presidential election, but they're not as familiar with the primaries, why they're important, how they work in the big picture, who's running, why they're running. So I want to try to create a base level, basically roadmap of elections. So immigrant community aside, and I would like to create almost like a, first-time voter kind of roadmap. So, we talked about primaries and general elections, and we spoke about how the next coming election, in theory, is going to be May 17th, and we're going to update everybody if that changes. We'll update you regardless, but if it changes, we'll let you know. So in this coming election, who's running?
Yeah, so in Pennsylvania, this upcoming election is a federal midterm election.
And what does that mean?
So that means it is a even number year that is not when the president is on the ballot. And in Pennsylvania in particular, it's a big one. We have an open governor seat because Governor Wolf is term limited. We have an open Senate seat because Senator Toomey is retiring. We also have congressional seats, which run every 2 years. We have half of the state Senate, all of your state reps, and then we also have political offices. So if you want to be involved in the Democratic or Republican parties, either at the state party level or at the local party level, those offices are also up for election.
So that's a lot of different positions. So if you're listening, this is an important election. Please make sure you start getting involved. And this is a very, very good starting point to start getting you that information. So now...
Let me add something quickly. So just on our map, like where we add in Somerton, Bustleton areas, like pretty much the entire political map is being changed right now. So we got the Bobby Heenan, who's no longer there. We got the fully redistricted, like pretty much Northeast Philadelphia. So it's not just one seat. Right now you can impact the political scene within the Northeast Philadelphia tremendously. It's not like just electing a president or something, like you said in the beginning. Like right now they can actually impact the community on the biggest scale within just elections that no one knows of yet.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I always tell everybody is when there's a race for district attorney or your local city council or anybody who actually has any say about how your community functions, I find it to be way more important than the president. That's just my personal opinion. But it's important to have the information before you go out and vote, because otherwise you're voting blindly, and that's just as dangerous. So speaking of which, how can I educate myself in a non-biased way? Because I feel like sometimes, if you're a Democrat or if you're a Republican, it doesn't matter if you belong to another party, you tend to get information from that particular party, which is not really helpful for the big picture. We're so focused on party information that it's kind of hard to find unbiased information. So is there anything you can recommend?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the hardest things. So if you're looking for information about how to vote, where to vote, when to vote, you should get that information directly from our office. We're responsible for making sure that those operations are occurring. So to make sure that you're informed and that you're able to vote and you're doing the procedures properly so your vote counts, going directly to a trusted source, directly to the source is your best bet. As far as learning about the parties and the candidates, that's much harder. We can't be involved in any of the partisan information. So you really have to try and look for sources that, document where they're getting their information from, the local news, local nonprofit organizations like your own. Finding people that you trust their views and finding out where their information is coming from is important. Just reading things on the internet, you don't know where it's coming from, really isn't the best way to learn about the candidates.
Are there any organizations, and I want to take out our own bias, so other than nonprofits or community groups, are there any well-respected groups in the city that you know of that are nonpartisan that people can look to for? So, for example, Roman's organization, Northeast Phila Connected, they provide stuff on an educational level. They try not to endorse candidates. But if a candidate doesn't, so if they would invite two people who are running for the same position and one of them doesn't show up, we're still going to move forward with the interview because we want to get as much information out as possible. And it's up to the candidate whether or not they want to be interviewed. So I find it to be a little, like you said, it's difficult to get that completely unbiased opinion. But are there organizations that specifically deal with politics that will show, information about all the politicians or all the candidates?
Yeah, I'm not really aware of any in Philadelphia that will just take information about all the candidates and give you, a nonpartisan, non-biased, information about them. At the most, you might get, like from an organization like the Committee of 70, you might get a list of who the candidates are.
Okay, well, that's
which
start.
is a start. They may link to those candidates' websites themselves. That's also a good place to just get information, see what the candidates tell you about themselves and how they portray themselves. And you can really learn a lot from, what their priorities are by how they communicate.
So you mentioned that Committee of 70 is a good place to kind of start. Does the commissioner's website also say who's running for each office, and how does one get that information?
We do. So our website is philadelphiavotes.com. We list all the candidates. And when the ballots are ready, we put the sample ballots up so you can actually see what the ballot will look like prior to Election Day. But we don't link to any outside sources of information for those candidates.
I'd like to add something here because before each and every election, I do hear more and more things that I'm running for a particular seat, like whoever is saying that. I'm about to start a fundraiser for that. But how do you actually know that the person is running, especially prior to them registering? Like, do they have any obligations?
So if a candidate is raising money, they do have obligations to file with our office. So they would file their political committee, and we can, make that information publicly available about who is filed. They have to file campaign finance reports detailing where they're raising money from and how much they've raised. Those are also publicly available. But until they file their nomination petitions and go around the community and get signatures to actually get on the ballot, you won't see them in a list of official candidates.
So pretty much it's not regulated. I can say that I'm running for the president, start collecting money for it, and then I changed my mind. What do I do with this money?
Yeah, so if you raise money exploring a candidacy and then you decide not to run, there are a couple different ways that candidates can approach that. They can return the money, or they can spend it on any approved campaign expenses.
Shall I continue?
Yeah, go ahead, because right now I'm trying to absorb the information and try to find, can you provide us with the source where this information could be distributed within the community? Because they do need to see these links, and when somebody is trying to say that I'm running for a particular seat, so they can actually go and backtrack it to the city of Philadelphia, who's actually registered to run for.
Yeah, so for local candidates, all that information is available with us and the Board of Ethics. So starting at philadelphiavotes.com is a good place to start. If they are statewide candidates or candidates for a state office like state rep, they would file with the Department of State, which is vote.pa.gov. And then federal candidates, if you're talking about Senate or Congress or President, they have to file with the FEC, which is a totally different process.
Yeah, so I think we need to create a separate post about it, explaining people where to find the information about the candidates that they think might be running.
Yeah, Roman's always looking out for safety. And I think that's also an important reminder in regards to possible fraud. Make sure you look up who you're giving your money to. So I'm going to continue unless we have any more fraud and safety questions.
Go ahead.
No, you want to do your research on candidates, whether you're giving them money or even if you're voting for them. You should not just be doing this without a thought in your mind. Try not to vote just because you know a name or just because your friend said so. Do some research so that we can have an actually educated, informed election. It will be good for all of us. Okay, so I want to ask you questions that relate to our community as well as others. If somebody has some kind of disability, whether it's visual or hearing, what kind of accommodations does I don't know if it's the commissioner's office, but the election process provide?
Sure. So the voting systems themselves are ADA compatible. So if you have visual or hearing issues, you can vote.
And for those who don't know, the ADA is the American Disability Association. So
all of our polling places have to meet those standards. So whether that means installing ramps or door stops, everybody has the right to access the polling place, and we make sure that they have the ability to do so. Voters are also entitled to assistance. So if you would like to vote by mail, you're entitled to receive assistance either at the polling place or in advance to submit your ballots.
Now, what about if you speak English as a second language?
Yeah, so by the Voting Rights Act, Section 203, jurisdictions like ours are obligated to provide materials and ballots in languages when they meet certain thresholds. So prior to this year, Philadelphia was required to provide everything in English and Spanish. With the new census, we are also now adding Chinese to all of our materials. And that is a process that we're going through this year to really upgrade all of our resources. We're also looking to add additional resources for more languages. So even though federal law won't require it of us, we've been working with the community to try and figure out how we can best serve what they refer to as LEP voters, or limited English proficiency. So I think, over the next year, we're going to continue to expand access for, likely Russian, Vietnamese, and a bunch of other languages.
That's great. And I also want to just point out the fact that, as Seth mentioned, we have all of their information is based on the census. So when the census does come up, which I know we just passed one, make sure that you fill out what language you speak, because that is going to directly determine what resources are coming into the community, whether it's election or otherwise. So, if you speak any other language other than English, Spanish, or Chinese, it's that much more important for them to have the numbers to base their information off of. As far as access, do you need an ID? Do you need to be a citizen? How old do you have to be? What are the requirements to even vote?
Sure. So in order to vote, you have to be 18 by the time of the election. So you can pre-register if you're 17 and a half, turning 18 prior to the next primary or general election. You do have to be a citizen, and you have to be a resident for at least 30 days in the Commonwealth. So those are the basic requirements for being eligible to register and to vote. So we make sure that once you meet those requirements, your name will be in the poll book, and then you'll be able to actually cast your vote. For first-time voters in a division, you do have to show ID, but it doesn't have to be photo ID. There's a whole list of allowable IDs, including the voter registration card that we will send you when you register. So it'll have your name and your address on it, And if that information matches the records that are in the poll book and you have that card because we mailed it to you, you can use that for your first time voting requirement. And then after you do that for the first time, you don't have to show identification to vote at the polls. Now, in order to request a mail ballot, there are different standards. So when you apply to vote by mail, you have to provide either your driver's license number or the last 4 digits of your social, so that we can match that to your records so that we know that we're sending the ballot to the correct person.
Makes sense. So you mentioned that you can use your voter registration ID as an ID once you get to the polls. What goes into getting that voter registration ID that it qualifies as an ID?
Yeah, so similar to when you apply for your ballot, when you apply to register to vote, you have to provide either your driver's license or your last 4 of your social, and we check those numbers against the records that the state has, so we can confirm your identity when you're registering.
So when you're hearing on the media or usually social media that, anybody can just go vote, it's not quite that simple.
No, it's not. And when somebody shows up to vote who isn't in the poll book, they can't just go vote on the voting machine. So as Roman knows from serving as a judge of elections in Philadelphia, if you go to the polls and you're not on the list, the judge of elections should give you a provisional ballot. Now, essentially, there's 2 ways you can approach this. One, you can actually call us first and make sure you're in the right place, because oftentimes people will go to the wrong polling place. So just because you're not in the poll book, you might be registered somewhere else. And in that case, you should go to where you're supposed to vote. They can check you in properly and have you vote on the machine. But if all of that has happened and we still can't identify you, you can vote by provisional ballot.
And what is a provisional ballot?
Yeah, so a provisional ballot is a paper ballot that's at the polling place. You fill out your ballot, you put it in the envelope, and then you put all of your information on the envelope. And then what we do is we will actually go through that and verify your eligibility to determine if that ballot should count. And like I said, sometimes people just go to the wrong polling place, in which case that ballot can count. So if you're registered in Somerton, but you go to vote in Bustleton, that ballot might be in a different state rep district, so it won't count for state rep, but it could count for Congress or for Senate or for governor. You might go and you might say, hey, I think I'm registered in the Democratic Party, but you aren't for some reason. If you are supposed to be registered in that party, we'll count it. If not, we'll only count the ballot questions. Or in some cases, you thought you were registered, but you turned in your application late and you're not actually registered, in which case we won't count that ballot.
So to avoid the logistical nightmare, first of all, I guess the first question is, how do you get registered? And then if you're not sure about registering, because you only have to do that once, how do you then double check all this information? Maybe you moved somewhere because of all of the fun that's been happening lately or otherwise. How do you go about that to prevent these kind of situations?
Sure. Yeah, so you can register on a paper application and hand it in or mail it in, or you can actually go to the state's website and you can register online. And you can submit that application online. And if you have a signature on file with the Department of Transportation, then they will take that signature and use that as your signature for registering to vote. And, once you submit your registration, you should get in the mail your registration card. And if you don't for some reason, then you can check on the state's website or you can call us to find out the status of your application. And you'll definitely want to make sure that you're registered prior to each election. And you can go online and you can check your status. And you can also check where your polling place is.
What's the reason to check every time for every election if you only have to register once?
So the main reason to check is because sometimes polling places move.
Okay.
So whether it's a school building that's under construction or a church that is closed for some reason, you should always double check where you're registered. And when you're doing that, you can actually check your registration status at the same time.
Okay. What about transportation? Is there anything that the city provides for people who have trouble getting to the polls?
Yeah, so the city doesn't provide transportation for getting to the polls. But what we do is we attempt to make the polling places as close as possible to where you are registered and where you live. So Philadelphia has 1,703 divisions. So these divisions are very small, and there are a lot of them. And that means there's a lot of work on our end because we have to program at least 2 voting machines for every division. We have to have an election board and staff for every division.
At this point, you have to promote that we need people to work at the election polls because right now it is understaffed tremendously.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I know that from the inside. And on the last elections, I actually had to set up 3 different machines because like there was no one to set them up. Like, so we need to promote that, and we need to show like when you're getting into the elections, you'll see how the elections work. So you would have a lot of questions resolved from behind the counter.
Absolutely. So because we have 1,703 divisions, you need about 7,500 poll workers across the entire city. And as Roma said, that experience is so valuable because once you see how the process actually works and you're checking your neighbors in and you sign them in and they go to vote on the machine, like you really see from start to finish how the process works. And if you are working in your division, like I said, it's a really small neighborhood-based area. You'll know your neighbors. You'll know who's coming. And that's how we try to make voting as accessible as possible, even with transportation being an issue sometimes.
And I have a question about it too, me personally. So if I'm working at the poll and I see the book and I know people personally in this book, can I call them to remind them that, guys, if there is an election today, I see you in my division, bring me a sandwich or something?
Yeah, so when you are serving on the election board, you have to be a little careful about that because you don't want to influence who's turning out in any potentially partisan way. But at the polling places, both parties are entitled to have what's called poll watchers. And one of the things poll watchers do is they will actually get the list of who has shown up to vote from the judge of elections, and they can actually reach out to the people that they want to turn out so that their candidate can get their voters out and vote. And that's absolutely legal. I mean, whether or not you vote is public information, not how you vote. But if you turn out or not, the parties will check to see so they can turn out their voters.
Now, speaking of, legalities, is there somewhere people can go, without reaching out to an attorney that has the list of rules regarding elections? And I don't necessarily mean the exact statutes. Some people are versed enough to read the statute, and some people need a more layman's terms type of list, let's say.
Yeah, so we have a lot of those resources available on our website. We also post them at the polling places. So you'll see a ton of posters when you go. And on the outside of the building, you might have candidates put their signs up for, vote for John Smith. But once you get inside the polling place, right on the outside doors and on the inside, you'll have lots of posters, blue, pink, yellow, and they'll detail the rights of voters, what the rules are. And we have it in the guidebook, which is publicly available on our website. And then also we'll have it posted.
Wonderful. So that's going to be...
To add to the poll workers, since we have a large, let's say, Russian-Ukrainian population here, through like 3 or 4 election cycles I worked at, I could not find anyone actually translating into those languages. How we can either encourage or get someone from the city to assist them. Because me as the judge of elections, I cannot get behind the curtain and just tell them, all right, so that's A, B, C, D, E.
Right. Yeah, so it's really important that we have bilingual interpreters in our communities, especially in areas where there are a lot of limited English proficiency voters. So we attempt to help communities recruit those bilingual interpreters. If there are organizations, neighborhood groups that have individuals who speak those languages, they can send them to us. We will train them and we'll pay them and assign them to the location. And like you said, yes, the judge of elections can't go behind the booth and help the voter, but the other board positions can if they're bilingual.
Including the judge of elections?
Not the judge of elections, but the majority inspector, the minority inspector, the clerks, the machine operator. If they are bilingual, they can go and help the voters.
I was the only one there.
Yeah.
All right. So definitely go. If you have any interest in elections, it's a way to get paid. If you are an official translator, reach out. We will put you in touch. If you're just interested in finding out more about the behind the scenes of elections, please reach out. Can get you a paying gig.
And how much is a paying gig is? Because every year it was changing. Like how much we're encouraging them for?
Yeah, so we, if you work and you go to training, you can earn up to $150 for the day.
Not bad.
We did have, a bonus pay during the pandemic, during the height of the pandemic in 2020. We have been advocating for more money for these positions for a while. City council has to appropriate the funds.
Hear that, City Council?
You got the elections coming up. You got to do something.
Yeah. So the more money we get appropriated for it, the more we can fund for those positions.
So big question on everybody's mind, especially after the 2020 elections. How does security work? How secure do you feel elections are? I mean, I don't want to know all the behind the scenes, obviously, about security, but can you speak to security in elections?
Yeah, the election operations are extremely secure. The ballots are programmed on what's called air-gapped computers. They don't touch the internet. They're locked up. Only the person who programs it has access to actually do that work. The voting machines themselves, they get programmed, they get tested. We make sure that the results on the test results match what we expect them to be.
How do you test that they match by what? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so when our employees test the ballots, they have a script, so they know what the results should look like. And then we test those results to make sure that they match the script. And then when we clear the machines out so that they're ready for election day, they get sealed and locked so that nobody can touch them. And then same thing for the ballots. When they get returned to us, they get locked up. So we verify the person who returned the ballot. We update those records so that if John Smith, we have a ballot from John Smith, we update that and it notifies John Smith, hey, we received your ballot. If John Smith never submitted a ballot, then we can flag that and we can say, hey, there's a question about this one here.
What if there was... I had a problem with my poll, like when there was John Smith Senior, and John Smith Junior, and they pretty much mixed up the signatures between the senior and junior. So how do we actually prevent that? Or like how that the same father, John Smith, does not come back and vote 3 times?
Yeah. So administratively, those types of errors occur. Human beings are human. They will sign on the wrong line. Father and son with the same name. We've seen that before. But what we haven't seen is, very often, I think there were a couple cases in the entire Commonwealth in 2020 where somebody will try and go back and vote multiple times. If John Smith Jr. and Sr. are both at your polling place, the judge of elections is responsible for making sure that somebody's only voting once. And, when they go to sign in, you'll know, like, you were just here and voted, why are you coming back? And it doesn't happen very often. Often what you'll see is that they will just sign the wrong lines. And after the election, we go through all those books and we look through all the paperwork and we make sure the numbers match up. And, we will go page by page and check those signatures.
Very good. So what else do I have for you? If something goes wrong, so like if you see something, not Roman as the judge of elections, but, if I walk in there and I notice that somebody just walked in a second time and they're going into the booth a second time, is there somewhere I can report it, and who do I report it to?
Yeah, so we work very closely with the district attorney's office. They have an election fraud task force. So every election day, they will have detectives out on the street, who we can report those types of things to. And they will file it and they'll look into it. We had a case where years ago, we found out that it was actually a judge of elections himself who was casting...
Dun, dun, dun.
Don't look at me.
who was casting extra votes.
Ooh.
And we discovered it by conducting an investigation like we do after every election. And we reported the DA. The DA worked with the federal government, and that individual was indicted and arrested. And again, it is extremely rare, but when we do find it, we do the legwork and we make sure it doesn't keep happening.
So where would a citizen report something? Do they report it to you, or do they report it to the DA's office?
Yeah, they can call either. Both hotlines get promoted prior to the election.
Why not to have those numbers in red on the door about like food told, like just sitting, like if you see something, that's the number to complain about it. Because not everyone, like, but a chunk of people here actually saying that I will not go to the elections because I think my vote was stolen. And that's the biggest concern that I'm trying to say, that it's difficult to impossible to steal your vote. You just need to see how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, we do provide those numbers to the election boards. They're posted on our website. They're posted on social media. The news reports on them. But yeah, it's about having those conversations with our community members and making sure that they understand, like, your vote's not being stolen. Your vote does count. You should go vote, sign in, vote on the polling, at the polling place, or request your ballot and send it in. Give us your email. You get a verification that it was counted.
Adding to the my vote is being stolen, or I'm not going to show up because my vote doesn't count. What was the closest numbers you've seen between, like, let's say red and blue or red and independent? Like, how many votes separating them, like, to win?
Well, I mean, I've seen elections that were tied.
Like, how tied? 2 votes, 5 votes?
Tied is tied.
Actually tied.
Like 5-5. That's what the word tied means.
So that, like, I'm just trying to say,
Sure.
on that scale, you can see that your vote actually could make the difference.
Yes. I mean, like Roxanne made the point earlier, the smaller the race, the more important it is that it can affect your daily life, whether it's city council or state rep. These are the people who are actually impacting your quality of life day to day. And because their districts are so much smaller, your vote has that much more weight and importance. An election for a state rep seat that is, only separated by a handful of votes, it's 2,000 to 1,900. I mean, those are really small numbers that if you work that district and you vote and you get your family to vote, you can actually make a difference on who wins that race.
That's what I'm trying to deliver to the community. Like, far northeast or northeast in general have 350,000 registered voters. Average turnout within the Philadelphia is 300,000 voters. That means the northeast itself can choose a raccoon for any seat within the city, or whatever they will nominate in order to go there.
Please do not vote for the raccoon.
I like him.
We're trying. We're trying to push elections in a better direction. Okay, so speaking of better direction, what resources are available to the community as far as election education, if any? Because I was actually speaking to Mr. Brown at your office at one point, and it seems like there used to be more programming, and now not as much.
Yeah.
Not to put him under the bus. He was extremely, extremely helpful, though.
Well, there's a couple problems. So first is funding and resources.
Hear that, City Council?
Yeah. So we got an influx of money in 2020 to do educational funding, and we did. We'd like to do that more often, but we don't have the appropriations. And also the pandemic really, impacted our ability. A lot of the groups stopped meeting in person.
The old COVID excuse. It's my favorite one lately.
Yeah, a lot of groups stopped meeting in person, and it made it hard to get out and actually, talk to individual voters. You can only do so much when everything's virtual. But we did. We continued to do the best we could. So hopefully, as things are getting better, we'll get back out and we'll be able to come out to community meetings and really just talk to people about the importance of what we do and voting. And the more resources we have, the more people we can reach.
So what kind of concerns are appropriate for the commissioner's office? Because I don't want you to turn into this landline of people calling you with all sorts of issues. That's what Roman's for.
I'm sorry.
But really, I mean, what isn't an appropriate question for the commissioner's office?
Yeah, so anything related to voter registration or elections. So if you need help registering to vote, or you need help educating your community about when the election is.
You mean the actual commissioner will come out and talk to you?
Absolutely. No, we'd love to. I mean, it's the best part of the job. When you're out collecting ballots and people are saying to you, like, thank you for being here because, the Postal Service was delayed at that time. And if you weren't here collecting my ballot, like, my vote wouldn't have gotten in on time. Or somebody calls you and they have a problem with the registration and you're able to help them fix it and they get their registration card and they call you back to let you know that they got it. Like, those are the most important, best parts of the job because you're actually helping people. And at the end of the day, the community groups our offices, everyone has to keep in mind that, registration numbers, 350,000 registered voters or 1.1 million registered voters in the city. Those are the statistics, but they're all people. And the most important thing is keeping in mind that, who you're helping and why.
But also I'm trying to explain people that those 350,000 people, since they can do the difference or make the difference, investing 15 minutes of their time to walk or drive to the nearest poll is much cheaper and safer than moving to the other state.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if we're losing a congressional seat, it means people are moving out. So definitely go out and vote, get the information. And I just want to finish this up with a couple personal questions, sort of get to know your commissioner type questions. So I know you're from Philly because me and Seth actually ran for student council back in like elementary or middle school or something like that. I'll hold off on the embarrassing photos of both of us.
I'll get them to you guys, no worries.
But so what do you love about Philadelphia? What do you think makes it special?
Philadelphia is the smallest big city in the country.
Reno, Nevada is the smallest, biggest.
The question was directed at Seth. Thank you, Roman.
What I mean is, just everybody knows everybody. It's, you go to any part of this city and you have a connection to somebody. You can go to other cities like New York or LA and you just feel like one small fish in a big sea. But in Philadelphia, it's everyone's a community, and it's a community with heart, and it's a great place to live.
I think so too. What about hobbies outside of work? What are you into?
Yeah, most of my time is spent, with the kids. My daughter is
adorable.
Thank you.
They're both adorable.
She's has an eclectic interests. She loves soccer. She loves dance. She loves sports in general.
What's the favorite sport in the house now?
We watch a lot of soccer at home. She loves that, and so does the baby. He loves that as well. When Eagle season is on, every Sunday getting together and watching the football game, or going to the game. Both kids have gone to the stadium now and watched football live, so that's been nice.
What's the favorite sports teams in the house?
Yeah, everyone loves the Eagles.
Eagles.
My family has had season tickets for a long time, and one of my favorite stories to tell is when my grandfather was passing away, and he pulled my dad and my uncle into the hospital room with him. He said, "I've got two things for you boys to keep in mind before I go." So 1, take care of your mother. 2, don't ever sell my Eagles tickets. So it's it brings everyone together.
Philly family through and through.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, probably out of sheer curiosity, what is your current favorite food? Is it still the same?
Oh yeah. No,
It's not ramen noodles, right?
No, not ramen noodles. No, everyone knows pizza's my favorite food. East Coast pizza is just so much better than anywhere else in the country.
All right. What about hidden talents?
No, I don't have much hidden talents.
Come on, you're a commissioner. You got to get there somehow. You got to have some talents.
But not hidden. No, I played soccer growing up. So I played on the high school team. But yeah, no secret hidden talents.
Any fun facts that you want to share?
I have a lot. Having grown up next door to you, Roxanne.
Uh-oh.
No, it's look, I'm just
Okay, now I'm curious. So go on.
No, I'm just I'm grateful to be in a position where I can help people and make sure that our city's elections are being run the right way. And at the end of the day, being able to serve in Philadelphia is just an honor. Growing up in the Northeast, I love this community, and I'm really, really happy to be here.
So last question. If you could give any advice to the younger generation, because apparently it's not us anymore, that want to follow in your footsteps, as far as, how you started, what advice you would give them. Do you have any, rules for politics that you want to share?
Yeah, it starts by just getting involved. Volunteer, start at the bottom, put in the legwork, show up, and focus on helping people. And when you put in that effort, it doesn't go unnoticed. And, as you get involved and you work with the community, the opportunities will come.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for coming. You were a wealth of information, always. And I really appreciate you speaking to our community, and hopefully, we can work together in whatever capacity to see if we can't, do more for the community, both through Roman's organization and the commissioner's office. And thank you, Roman, our judge of elections, local celebrity.
Local celebrity, yeah, sure. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Roman.
And I already have transferred the camera on my lovely face, huh? So, guys, thank you very much for spending this almost, an hour? A little over an hour. Thank you for your time, and we'll hope to have more interesting interviews. Yep. So, guys, Seth, Roxanne, very nice seeing you here. And that's it, I guess. Have a good day, everyone.